Welcome to the April 23rd OpenZFS production user call. We have Steve, Stu, Daniel, Andrew, Mark, and myself, Michael, and we would like to talk HA clustering. We each have our own definition and our own experiences. Andrew, I think you chimed in.
Oh, I always try to push it off to the application layer.
I
And
know a guy who has a good use for high availability clustering, and it's because he's communicating with satellites with super high latency, and they're in the sky, and you don't want things to go down for 1 second, and you basically can never reboot the machine that it's on. But I think if you're not talking to satellites, then you have a machine that needs to be security patched occasionally. And at that moment, when you're doing a security patch, you're rebooting the machine, which means you can move it without a high availability cluster. And I mean, I think that people think that high availability, like 13-second failover type things are are good for, are important for 10% of use cases out there. And I think it's way, way less than that. I think people aren't really thinking about, the complexities introduced, the limitations they've set for themselves, the difficulties, and the fact that they really have to reboot their stupid machine every month or two, every month or three anyway. So, like, why are we paying, what did Stu say, 370%? I think that's about right. To do that when ZFS can perform a warm, or not warm, but you know, a cozy cluster pretty damn well.
I like that cozy clusters. And you and I have philosophized on this of, well, I'll just say, hey, I consider the ZFS written property God's own property. And the moment all the participating systems are at zero, you know you are synchronized. And if there is a, 1 minute to 10-minute outage bringing up something on a different machine, that is so much more advantageous than the real world multi-week or month outages when people realize, oh, this like system burned up and we didn't really plan for uh, a quick replacement. So, I mean, when you mention 13 seconds to 10 minutes, I mean, in practice, I've seen it be days or weeks for replacing stuff. So kind of
Yeah,
let's find that healthy middle ground at the low end there, low end in time. Yeah, go ahead.
as Andrew said, I mean, if it's at the application level, as long as the the generally the most valuable part is the transaction and the timing of the transaction for anybody that's doing air quote HA.
Mm-hmm.
I'm if I've got, you know, billions of dollars running through this every minute, it's a different conversation than I've got, you know, one transaction that can be manually redone 20 minutes later and nobody dies.
Bingo.
And you have to do the application failover anyway. You can't not do that part. So if you already have high availability in that way, then what are you really adding by doing operating system level high availability?
Right. The other piece of that too is, okay, yeah, during the business day, I need 5 nines. After the business day, I need 0 nines. That is a perfectly valid use case for a lot of businesses. You don't need HA if you're going to have that kind of built-in maintenance window anyway. But it goes back to the risk appetite of the entire enterprise that you're interfacing with. And that's how we talked some of our customers through this process. It's not, hey, you get HA with this. Okay, what is your definition of HA? And what is your appetite for being down for 10 minutes or 3 minutes or 20 0.2 seconds. It's a completely different conversation based upon the market.
Nice.
What does an outage cost, and what does
Whether you're
protecting against it cost?
it's your HA is insurance.
Yep.
And this was a $300 consulting engagement for this last 4-minute conversation. If it was one of the big consulting firms.
There you go.
Well, now that I'm working with TrueNAS a little with their, fancy pants, I spent $250,000 on something you can build for $12.99. Um, it's interesting their approach to AJ because, there's still point of failures galore there. You just have two nodes, and then you need another pair anyway. So I don't know. It's just interesting that it exists. I mean, it's cool, and it certainly does solve a lot of problems. It solves the upgrade problem very nicely. I love that. Um, I'd rather have two nodes. So depending on the cost there and how things are organized. Um, that's interesting. But it's curious because I'm not 100% sure about what they're making updates really, really smooth. That's cool. I do like that. I'm glad that I joined this call having never touched, having just a couple years in ZFS, and now I've actually tried TrueNAS. But the HA stuff, I'm thinking about how is that going to save my what's the percentage chance that that's going to save my butt versus there's a problem with the controller or somebody bumps a wire or you know what I mean? There's so many things that can go wrong, and that's where they chose to put their the the fancy thing. I'm not saying that it's never worth it. If you've got the money for it, go for it. It's like I said, it's really cool. The upgrades, I've never felt an upgrade so smooth before. But I don't know. It's just interesting.
Well, I mean, that's the very logic of, why as much as possible, I say try to push it to the application layer. If the
Right.
application layer ends up giving you availability from that point down, rather than one of the lower layers where you still have a bunch of stuff on top that could fail and cause you a problem.
Yeah, right. And that's interesting because we have three, at this particular site, there's three TrueNAS servers, there's an important FTP machine, and of course all of that stuff is backed up. And of all the things that could go wrong, that file drop could just change the DNS entry if the file dropped to the other TrueNAS bots, and everyone lives happily ever after. It's the high availability add-on is what is the actual percentage of likelihood of failure that's decreasing, and I've got to think that it's way, way, way below one. That the next failure state will have to do with with something that's going to save my butt on. I don't know.
So ZFS is remarkably portable, and if it's connected to, say, a lovely array on a JBOD with a PCI controller, and you have your favorite high-performance NIC, and from there something you boot to and a minimum RAM requirement, if that TrueNAS nifty HA system were to use a JBOD and burn up completely, I do see how one could, in 15 minutes, apologize to the boss who has a i7 desktop with 64 gigs RAM, maybe more, cannibalize it, jam in the network card, jam in the HBA, and rig up horribly a SATA USB boot module and get the whole thing back up and running quickly rather than waiting on a new hardware delivery. and then getting through the project or day or whatever. Of course, you may have network issues on TrueNAS specifically where it really doesn't like NICs to change on you if you don't have them in DHCP mode, but that's just inside baseball. But I just personally have to embrace the heck out of the sheer fundamental modularity of it all and can mitigate massive outages with just a quick standby swap in hardware. And I've had to do that, sadly. So anyway, that's my little take on it. And dare I say, know your hardware. Just know the difference of a disk controller failure versus a NIC failure versus a JBOD power supply failure versus all those factors. You know, the idea that it's this black box that you just have that has a very expensive 800 number on the front of it. Well, it's like, well, yeah, but that's just me.
Yeah, all those things break. And also sometimes, yeah,
in this
sometimes drives
broader,
go. Oh, sorry.
No. Yeah, it's all true. In this last year of more hands-on IT for me, it's the dumbest stuff that fails, not the, high performance kernel and storage system. Of course, anything can fail, but I mean, don't overthink it, please. Is I guess my take on it. Yeah, Jan's rolled in. So anyway,
Yeah, I think my last failure was a drive. Yeah, my last node failure was a drive failed in such a way that the, that the controller was kind of hosed. Like it was flaky as hell. And then there was some, there was some fat fingering because I asked um the hands to remove, the probably damaged drives. They removed, the wrong thing, or they didn't do it at all. And then,
no.
As happens.
It took another
I've had that
node.
too.
Yeah, it took another node. I had to set another machine, set it up the same way. Okay, I'm getting errors on this disk. Did you pull it or not? So, that was the resolution. But I don't know. I mean, if this was a HA machine, it would have made no difference.
Oh,
They would have been just as confused.
Yeah, so Jan, we're having a bit of a roundtable discussion on HA. How do you define it? What are your metrics of success, failure, and downtime? Is it, the 13-second category, the 10-minute category, or in practice, the 2-week category? Because maybe you're, insuring against the wrong components. Go ahead.
For me, the service is highly available when something dies and the users don't notice. So for a file system, it serves all I/O requests within a reasonable deadline, not within some very low value, but something like reasonable. For a mail server, if fetching an email takes 5 seconds, then it takes 5 seconds instead of a few milliseconds this time around. But for something like a file server, when listing a directory takes 10 minutes or whatever, users will notice.
Yes.
And when possible, it's preferably to move the redundancy into the application. Like, I don't know, in DovCarve, for example, before they took replication away from us, it was easy.
Oh, gosh, okay.
Yeah, now it's the open source community edition is good for a single server deployment. Get fucked.
Huh. Interesting.
Aha, I never switched from Cyrus, so.
Yeah. It has treated me well for a decade, and now they're suddenly doing a late rug pull. At least it feels like that. Oh no, you can still do bidirectional synchronization. We are just removing anything you need to trigger that better than a cron job. Maybe I will finally have to bite the bullet and look at Cyrus, but yes.
I have a very organization specific angle. which
Mhm.
is a lesson I learned back working at a large bookstore off I-5 that was extremely busy during the holidays. The guests, the customers thought it was such an inconvenience for them to take several minutes to write a check. Whereas if I was operating a cash register, that was the best, like 5 to 10 minutes of the whole day. Okay, 5 minutes, because there's nothing I can do. So don't rule out employees of an organization kind of loving when things kind of go offline and we'll be back and they break for lunch or a break or something. I mean,
Oh,
Oh, I've seen that
is-
many places.
exactly. It's like, well, oh
I
no, it's
totally
broken.
get that.
Oh, terrible smoke break time, whatever. Yes, go ahead.
But when someone is already in quite a bit of stress and suddenly something they depend upon on the critical path to getting the job done fails, like, oh, I finished this file, now I have to upload the document to whatever service. No, a USB drive is not an acceptable workaround for multi-dozen gigabyte
Correct.
files
Absolutely.
supposed to be backed up and made available to someone else. Especially these days where not everyone is in the same building, you can't just assume that everyone is on the same campus and can just easily swap a USB drive
Correct.
if the security policy even allows that. Like if the USB ports allow block devices and they can mount and so on. Given how paranoid, especially Windows shops have become over the years through pain and suffering, that sometimes it's just blocked. Yeah.
You are generous about the average small business. I am undoing a whole bunch of workarounds to get them back to where like one client should be. So just, I mean, have a complete plan B, of course,
And
financial processing, real-time transactions, blah, blah, blah. That may not have an
yeah,
alternative, but gee, if don't stop your business because the one single thingamabob broke and there's, the entire world
heck,
has to
and
stop. Welcome to
for
it,
a
man.
lot of businesses, stopping the business for 10 minutes effectively isn't the end of the world.
Right,
Yes,
exactly.
it's an outage, but if the recovery time is 10 minutes until you can work again, and even in a coffee shop, most people will get a bit hangry.
Exactly, yes.
Nobody will die, even if they proclaim they've died 3 times over,
Bingo.
because I don't know, overpriced bagel was the wrong temperature.
Exactly.
But
Welcome.
that's just meat space problems.
Correct. Wetware problems. John, welcome. We are having a roundtable discussion on high availability, regardless of how you define it, because we all seem to have a slightly different definition.
So
Go ahead, Jan.
I would
Michael
say
knows I like my bagels.
There you go. Oh, yes,
that
that
the
was
important part
the
is
throughput was pretty good.
for me is first of all time to recovery of service and did I lose any modifications?
Hmm.
Because I have a lot of use cases where even an hour of downtime, yes, someone will yell, but they will get over it and get over themselves eventually and accept that it takes a few minutes now for someone to, I don't know, plug a new fuse in or whatever. Um, Power cycle the PDU
Yep.
instead of a single port on it. But if you've lost any data, that's a whole other problem because now you have to recover the state in a messy way, especially if it's not highly structured data, but a file system. If there's something someone could have written to the file system and you just don't know, then it's messy. Like, oh, you've lost the last hour of writes? What has changed? I don't know. I lost the data. That's
Ooh,
not a
there you
discussion you
go.
want to have.
Uh, True. Has anyone had a situation where keep the boss happy was the metric of success, regardless of the performance of systems
Uh,
and financial
keep,
things?
Management by blinky lights.
Exactly. Yes.
Is that ever not the metric?
Exactly.
Bingo.
It's always implicitly the metric, but it's normally not the one you're codifying.
Keep
Exactly.
boss happy.
You have sometimes someone will be very angry with you despite you hitting all the SLAs because you silently over delivered for too long.
Ah, bingo. Yeah, yeah.
It's expectation management.
And actually, in a
Uh,
way, this is all expectation management across the board for HA. It's like, well, what is your realistic,
mhm.
nice. That's all.
So delivering can set you up for failure because nobody really values what you've been doing. But when suddenly you can only meet the SLA and they notice that the SLA is bad, and they will yell at you, why does it only serve 5,000 IOPS in 1 gigabit a second?
There
Yep.
was a brief moment TrueNAS had built-in net data, and I'm like, okay, just turn it on, give the little URL to the bean counters and boss, and just
Mhm.
let them stare at blinky lights.
Well, it can do a bit more with alerting.
Heck yeah,
Uh,
perfect. But don't
for
bother.
example, you can
That's all.
use it to feed into pushover notifications.
Okay, good to know. It can do push.
If you really want to confuse them, you don't turn on when it goes off page to stop updating, because that's the default in NetData.
Oh,
Yeah,
rephrase that.
they went through a
Yeah.
confusing phase where initially you could have as many devices through their cloud proxy as you want. Then they said, oh, new users will be grandfathered in, old
Ah,
users will be grandfathered in and will get to keep their unlimited account. Then they said, oh, now you have the new gimmicky features enabled for 90 days, and afterward you're treated like a new user, and you can only have five
interesting. Okay.
without an account, but you can still do it all with local access. So you have to expose at least through a proxy or relay because they have their own relay service, the NetDart log stream or whatever you want to call that,
Hmm.
telemetry stream, because they support store and forward and so on, just not with a single centralized account management and cloud proxy, which isn't something I want anyway, but it's still annoying
Oh,
thing to
okay.
do. And then send you notifications for bullshit.
Any other wetware issues in yes, HA wetware is at wetware HA.
Mm. So one of the things you can do, but it's again this semi-commercial open source kind of thing, is run min.io with replication if you need an object storage.
Hmm. Whose replication? ZFS or their own
There's
conception?
object storage level
Oh,
replication so
cool.
that you can have proper failover or even clustering with forward error correction for availability during partial outages. So as long as you can have a quorum and reach your at least your forward recovery threshold so that the data is readable, you can also write.
Hmm.
But I haven't looked at Garage what their HA story is. It's another supposedly slightly less commercial open source S3 re-implementation.
Is the replication
So
open source or you have to pay the piper?
the replication is open source, but you have to set it up. It's not that trivial to do. So basically, yeah.
Okay, cool. Cool. Um,
I don't know that synchronous or if only the asynchronous replication, but that's probably the one you want unless you have very high durability guarantees and your application doesn't have the ability to target multiple availability zones. Where
uh,
if you have to pay a min.io enterprise licensing, it's not really that attractive because it's paid for per terabyte.
good.
And yeah, you're paying software licensing for something you're running on your own hardware per capacity, which is, in my opinion, bullshit, but it's the enterprise way to do and make everything OpEx instead of CapEx.
Mhm. So does anyone have rules of HA like the 3-2-1 backup rule or some little just I think your average user comes into it just thinking there's some miraculous technology that does stuff, but in my last decade or so, everyone wants HA, but once they realize you want like 3 systems, so you have a quorum and this and that, they're like, oh, I've got budget for 1.5. We'll talk about this again in 2 years. Any
The bigger problem
guidance there?
with real synchronous replication is the latency, which people tend to overlook.
Mm-hmm.
That you can only acknowledge a write once it has reached the quorum.
Mm-hmm.
So your I/O latency goes a lot higher. You have a lower minimum latency, and because you involve multiple parties, your latency distribution sucks, and you will have a long tail of really long latency failures. I guess there are things you could do, like after the P95 latency, you attempt another write to a different subset or whatever, but yeah, this becomes very messy and complicated. And
You said P95?
after P95 write latency, you could schedule another write to a different subset of the cluster or whatever.
What do you mean by P95?
But
That's a new one for me.
95 percentile
Oh, I see. Yeah, okay. I
of
hadn't heard it phrased that
the
way.
expected write latency, you schedule another write to a different or something like that. But yeah, it just moves your latency a few digits in the distribution, which is really nice, but it's a lot of complication.
Yep.
It's not transparent to the application and search protocol. And yeah, at some point you're pretending you're Amazon, Google, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, just for the fun of it.
And that's
You're not
why
going.
the application already knows or
Mhm.
has a better chance of knowing what its reliability requirements are than maybe I do. So
And my
give it to the
expectation
application.
is,
Yeah, that's it.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
it's a good
all
mantra.
of these complications tend to create more downtime than they prevent in small deployments. You reach something like Ceph, which you don't really deploy once, but you keep it running with a dedicated team of 5 to 7 people. So
Bingo.
that's your operating expenditures. You have to keep a team babysitting this service. Uh, yeah.
Well, that actually
Well,
makes a
and
great point. Dental plans are expensive, such that is that, CapEx versus OpEx. I mean, is the miraculous HP appliance going to save you a fortune in human resources? Because just thinking out loud.
and even if you've
Oftentimes it's
necessarily
the other way around, keeping the complexity implied by having all of this HA automation requires a bigger team, not a smaller team.
yeah, if
It,
you're even if
Bingo.
you have a big team of people trying to maintain it, we've still had outages at Amazon, we've still have
Mm-hmm.
outages at Google. These are not small teams. These are not people who don't know anything about HA, and even they from time to time have problems.
Mhm.
Good point. Yeah, it's like talk about hidden costs. It's like, oh, is there the HA license versus, gee, there's another person to babysit the thing, etc. So yeah.
It's designing the whole system so that a distributed system can hit your throughput and latency goals, and then having someone to babysit all of this added complexity of electing a leader in the quorum and the likes babysitting all of that, making sure that all of these additional components and automations don't, I don't know, fail back to a not yet in sync old leader or something like that. Like horror scenarios where your database leader comes back and suddenly you're rolling back transactions or whatever mess.
Yeah,
Just
on that note,
yeah.
I'll call it AI. Sure, it's AI.
No, it's
If a
not AI.
machine needs to make a decision of what the correct remediation is, I think shooting the wrong node in the head or boot loops and other crazy stuff is almost more likely than just having a human being spend 5 minutes diagnosing the situation and taking action.
No sane person would argue that this is or should be AI. These are at best state machines.
And by that, I mean, it's a simple algorithm taking in a limited amount of criteria and making a decision for you. And
Yeah, we're talking
a bunch of
we're
AI is
talking about
behaving like exactly that. So it's a blunt instrument. I'm not giving it any credit for being intelligent, but I think I don't want to trust that intelligence or that claim of intelligence. Go ahead.
and I
It's
was
not
going to say
intelligence.
we're not talking about AI when we're talking about this. What we're clearly talking about is some kind of state machine that we have designed, either us directly
Mm-hmm.
or somebody else providing it to us.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, here's a third-party
Axos, WAF,
or a separate
whatever.
monitoring machine that handles the Stonef stuff. That is outside the network. I can see which one's up or down. I know which one to shoot.
And do you retain that decision or do you let it make a decision for you? I guess that's what I'm getting at.
I mean, as long as it's outside the network looking in, then, and I mean, obviously, we're talking about a case where a quick response is relatively important, then yeah, it should be able to make that decision.
But I would be very
But that's a very
careful
simple
with,
rule.
Sure.
so yeah, failing over once is okay. Failing back or switching back is maybe something a human should rearm.
Bingo.
Oh, absolutely. That
So,
I totally agree with.
because if you have your free node, I don't know, if you have that split up the wrong way, I don't know. What will happen? I don't want to find out.
Oh, welcome, Alexander. Yeah.
I mean, it
Go
is
ahead.
possible to design systems that can handle that correctly, but it takes quite a lot of being careful.
And
it takes a lot to trust it to be better than a human looking over the system, deciding in one brain at a time what to do with the cluster as a whole instead of lots of local agents which do not have the skepticism of a human operator. Just, failing back and forth.
I don't know if it was Ellen Jude saying, hey, they had a great HA system, but they didn't anticipate. I think it was NIC failure because they assumed, gosh, the storage people focus on storage, not networking. So they solved the heck out of the wrong problem. Alexander, we are just having a gentle roundtable on HA, regardless of your definition, and they're looking for, I don't know, war stories, success stories, horror stories, just kind of painting the picture.
My personal horror story is geo multipath within a single system.
Oh, yeah.
So I had a single disk with an unrecoverable read error in one of the partition tables.
Oh, yes.
And the system during reboot just kept trying to probe the disk, noticing the failure. It would fail over to the other link via geo multipath, try there, get the same error, have no links left, re-enable all links instead of totally failing the device and
Hmm.
trying again. And it did that the whole weekend over until I booted in to I logged into the IPMI serial console, unloaded the kernel module on the loader prompt, and then force imported the pool without geom multipathing to find out what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Boom.
So
Exactly.
without all of that crap, it would have worked. The only advantage of geom multipath was that in theory I could have a redundant path where each of the two host bus adapters was connected to each of the uh, SCSI port expanders, but I never had a bus cable die on me. So yeah,
Hmm.
I optimized for the very unlikely case instead of just of having an HBA fail or a cable.
Mhm.
Instead of just having each port, SAS port expander go into port multiplier go into each host bus adapter
Okay.
via two paths, and then just have a wider link to the same disk, which only shows up once to the operating system. Uh, yeah.
I will spare you my G multipath horror stories. I think it solves a heck out of problems I don't have and has caused me
Uh,
stress.
the big
Anyway,
problem is that because it resides at the geom, it doesn't know the difference between a link and a medium error, and so it can't do the right thing because every error is the same to it.
interesting. That's a good explanation.
So yeah, as it was at the cam layer, it would have the ability to tell a disk error from a path error and then do the right thing. And it could rely on it being a SCSI disk and trust the worldwide uh, device ID
Mm.
of a SCSI disk, and
Yep.
thereby you wouldn't need any labels. So it would just go by worldwide node number or whatever that is, and port number to
Yep.
identify ports, just like you would with fiber channel, if you have this kind of SAS topology. I guess we have to revisit that for MVME over fabrics for deployments in a few years.
Interesting. Alexander, do you have any definition of HA at the small business you work at?
Um, so as a technician, everything we've been talking about, can you guys hear me first of
Yes,
all?
absolutely.
Yes.
Welcome.
Yes, go.
Okay, this is like literally all I do all day is just mess with this stuff. But at the small business I work at, I'm under really aggressive NDAs about this kind of stuff, and like they're like just um really aggressive about that kind of stuff. Like they even sometimes are like, we don't want you contributing to open source because you're going to accidentally leak stuff. Uh, and I'm like, no, that's literally not possible. I write manual pages, and they have to exactly describe the underlying software and have nothing to do with anything outside of that. So I could talk at length about this, except I'm not allowed.
Oh, okay, no worries. No worries. So yeah, um, it's a large company. And we thank you for the domain-specific documentation contributions you make because, like you said, they can't really leak out of there. That's like what they are, and that's not helpful to speculate that you're somehow improving a manual page about an operating system about something external. Like, yeah, no. Well, feel free to read through the chat. It's been interesting. It's been good. Yeah, we all touch on this from time to time, and I'd be curious if this might be a topic we might want to start formulating for the summit in October. Like what could OpenZFS do better to facilitate HA by a number of definitions, some of which may be completely external, completely whatever. Go ahead, Stu.
Built-in iSCSI.
Does Illumos have a share iSCSI, Andrew?
Oh,
How could OpenZFS improve in
no.
service
If I mean, it's been a while since I've messed with it, but I believe our iSCSI initiator. Am I getting that right? No.
That's the target would be, I think, the system.
Yeah, the target is what I'm looking at.
Okay.
Our target side of things is handled separately, if I recall. I haven't used it in a while though, so.
Yeah. Just like, you can do NFS directly from ZFS.
Correct.
Why can't you iSCSI?
Well, let me do a quick search here.
Yeah.
For me, the big thing that I'm always trying to gently nudge the FreeBSD developers towards is the quality of DMESC outputs. Like, for me, that's the real meat and potatoes as a technician. There's obviously much better technicians than me at my work, but like, I'm really, really, really fast if we remove the outliers. And for me, like, the biggest thing is just like, if the machine is messed up, I just go right to the machine and get a serial console and like look at what the drivers are telling me is going on. And that gets right to the bottom of the issue and cuts through all the red tape and all the stupid diagnostic stuff. And for every, I mean, of course, we all know there's like a lot of situations where you do need to query specific stuff, but that's, for me, that's the biggest one, is like, how do we improve the quality of DMESC output? Because Linux DMESC output, where it's like hundreds of pages, is like not useful, right? So it's like, we've got to have all the key details and not have the non-key details, and make it in a consistent enough format. I haven't used Illumos to see what they're doing, but I'm very, very interested in just like open source, stick together, cross-platform stuff. I send my Xorg patches all the way over to GNU Herd, just because I want a sense of where we're all working together across projects. So I don't know how their DMESC output is. I know Solaris was really famous for just looking really clean in that regard, like in the boot up and everything. But that's my 2 cents on it.
Amen.
As far as the targeting stuff, the stuff you're going to look up is Comstar is what our system for that. And that handles iSCSI. It handles if you want to be a fiber channel target, if you want to be any of those kind of handling a block English, I can speak it, handing a block device over some kind of media is through Comstar. And generally speaking, you'll be doing one of two things. You'll be taking a file and using that as your storage for it on the system, or you can use a zvol. But I don't think there's a ZFS flag you can specify on a zvol to do it. And since it's a block device, it doesn't really make sense to try to do like a normal file system. It would have to be a zvol.
Sure. That's typically, for block devices, it's a block device. Cool. And I do see mentions of Oracle Comstar and Nexenta. Here's a
Comstar's from the Sundays, so
got it.
Illumos has it from that.
ZFS properties main page, zprops, does not mention any share iSCSI or whatever.
I guess
iSCSI is not mentioned in the properties main page.
Yeah, it was always just a separate thing that you configured.
Cool.
So FreeBSD has CTLD. as
And
the target.
And in addition, if you look at using, the number of parameters that you have to end up setting in order to do a SCSI or fiber channel target, there's just a whole huge list of them. It doesn't go real well
Hmm.
in an option like that because it would have to be so many different things that even cross multiple layers. Sorry.
No. My thing is like only orthogonally related. We just this week cleaned up the hardware section for the ISP driver, an optical fiber channel adapter. Previously in the hardware release notes, it just said card supported by the ISP adapter include, and it's like, okay, that's not really useful. But that's going to be in 14.3. I just MFC'd it.
Oh, cool. Thank you. I have a call to jump on. I trust some of you do too. This was a great discussion and low stress and wide open. And please do think about how we can continue it for the summit upcoming, because if there are little projects and improvements and docs to get in place, well, let's do that. Any final thoughts?
Like and subscribe.
Well, yes. Andrew, did you chime in?
No, that wasn't me.
That wasn't you. I heard someone. Yeah. Alexander?
It was me.
Yeah, hello.
Just a little social thing, man. I really appreciate you, Michael, for these calls, and also all of our regulars in these calls. These calls have some of the chillest vibe and some of the highest signal to noise ratios of anything that I can find currently. So just want to do like a little like everybody pat themselves on the back kind of thing for that, because that takes all of us to pull that off. One bad egg could easily ruin the bunch, and this is just a great call every time.
You've obviously missed a couple because there's been a lot of noise to signal at some of them.
Well, you've obviously missed our Discord.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Alexander. It's absolutely my pleasure to do this, and it's the annual comment like that that keeps me going. Anyway, do you want to repeat that thing you said, Jan?
Like and subscribe, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.